I think you have to think about how you're going to be using these satellite devices as well.
Right. If you're looking to like constantly texting while you're on the trail, I have so many questions about why that's what you're wanting to do. But anyways, the point is this class of devices really isn't going to necessarily solve that problem. No matter what device you're buying, no matter how much money you're willing to spend, like that's not really how satellite communications work. Welcome to This Fucking Trail, home to brutally honest takes on Texas trails, hiking, hilarity, and all things adventure. I'm your MC, Jon, and I'm here to warn you that this podcast is not for young children or anyone with a sensitivity to swears or strong opinions. And now over to the hiking hostess with the mostest, intrepid explorer and affirmed potty mouth, not to mention my wife, Gabrielle.
Yep, that's me. Today is a shit you should know episode. A type of episode that covers ways to not fuck up in the backcountry, things you should generally know out there, and how to have the best, safest experience out on the trail.
Okay, well, I'm excited to get into today's episode. And specifically, what are we talking about in today's
Today, in our shit you should know episode, we're talking about the ACR Bivy Stick.
Okay, very exciting. This is something we've talked about on a few episodes already. It's, I think, one of our favorite devices, certainly something that's always on the packing list.
Yes, every single time. We've used it since 2021. We've said we were going to talk about it, and here finally it is.
Okay, all right. Now, before we get too far into this, we do have a favor to ask you, the listener. We're having a ton of fun recording these discussions, and we're hoping that if you're hearing this, you're having a good time too. If you're getting something out of this, whether educational or purely entertainment, it would really help us out if you took a second and left us a review, preferably 5 stars. Liking and following is great as well if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, but the reviews do a lot to get the word out for us. And if you're feeling super fucking generous, head on over to our Substack, link in the show notes, and you can support the show more directly there. Now, back to the episode.
All right, let's get into talking about this Bivy Stick that we've referenced in so many of our other episodes. So the purpose of this Bivy Stick is that it turns any cell phone, whether it is an iPhone or an Android, into a satellite communication device. So what this means is it provides communication when cell service is not available. And most of the times when I head out into the backcountry, there's no cell service available. Out in the Big Bends, out in the middle of Texas, even heck, when I go out hiking out in Colorado, a lot of times there's no cell service. And so I don't have any way to tell you that I'm okay or to ask for help if I'm not okay.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of a key sort of safety concern for us when you started hiking more, when you started going to parks that were a little more off the beaten track, places where cell service wasn't just spotty, but actually like advertised as being non-existent.
I think what prompted us to get the Bivy Stick actually was our very first ever trip to Big Bend Ranch State Park. That's when we had gotten the Bivy Stick, right?
I think you might be right, yeah, because we had seen, like, they make it really clear online that cell service is not something you can expect to have in most of the park. And we wanted to explore a lot of areas where it was pretty clear that nobody was building cell phone towers. So we wanted some means of communication with the outside world just in case something crazy happened, because we're just those kind of people. We like to plan ahead and, you know, make reasonably smart decisions.
We did such stupid things on that first
So many
trip.
dumb things.
We went in our Honda Pilot, which is not high clearance, which is not all-wheel drive, and we took it out on some of those high clearance 4-wheel drive roads to get out to some waterfall, right?
Yeah, I think we were kind of heading out so this was Big Bend Ranch. We were heading out toward the Solitario there, which is a big mountain area, and the roads to get out there, I mean, they exist, and they are, technically speaking, roads. But I was really hoping, I remember at one point going up this gravel hill and having to like go back and forth to maintain traction. And I was just like, don't let this be that 0.01% chance that there's another car coming up the other direction, because there is no room.
Yeah, we learned lots of lessons. We will never take that Honda Pilot back out on those roads. We got away with it that one time.
Yeah.
But we really shouldn't have been out there in that car.
I do feel comfortable based on that and our Jeeping experience saying that I'm a pretty decent driver on terrible roads.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's kind of talk about the key features of this Bivy Stick. So first off, Bivy launched in 2018. The Bivy Stick is manufactured by ACR Electronics, who claims to be the leading development center for emergency beacons. So they sell all sorts of personal locator beacons and all kinds of fancy emergency equipment. And just to kind of be geeky, Bivy is short for bivouac, which refers to a temporary shelter or a camp, often used in outdoor activities. If you have to bivouac, you probably made a mistake somewhere, something happened. It's not something that most people plan on doing, but that's kind of what it refers to.
Yeah, and you know, you'll see if you frequent places like REI, as we do, you'll see bivy sacks available, which are sort of like a combination sleeping bag tent. So like this is an outdoor recreation nerd word, if you will.
Yes.
And kind of a great name.
It's a fun little reference. Bivy has global satellite coverage, which for somebody like me who doesn't understand anything about any of this stuff means that you can communicate anywhere. So Bivy uses the Iridium satellite network. Can you tell me a little bit about this? What's so special about this Iridium satellite network?
Sure. So Iridium is one of several popular satellite communications networks that are used by various services for geolocation, communication, those kinds of things. One of the things that makes Iridium special is that it is a low Earth orbit satellite network, which means it's actually quite close to the surface of the Earth, relatively speaking.
It's only 485 miles away from the Earth, to be exact.
That's right. And that sounds pretty far, but geostationary orbit, which is where most GPS satellites are, and actually many of Iridium's competitor networks are located, is 22,000 miles above the Earth, like solidly into outer space as opposed to just barely into outer space. I think the most common border for outer space is something like 100 kilometers, which is like 67 miles, something like that. Anyways, that's sort of neither here nor there. The point is, it's much closer to the surface of the Earth than the majority of satellite networks. This is very important for a communications network because radio communication in general, you know, like cellular service uses radiation just the same as radio does. All of these waves travel at the speed of light, which is very fast, but actually not instantaneous. And so the further away something is, the longer it takes for your messages to arrive. And the more likely that some sort of interference might occur, which could cause problems for you. So there are a lot of advantages to having a network of satellites in low Earth orbit that is arranged in a mesh. I think on the Iridium's website, they advertise that each Iridium satellite is connected to up to 4 other Iridium satellites, allowing them to essentially build a global communications network. And that provides coverage pole to pole, more essentially. I think there are a few like asterisks where like if you're like actually at the North or South Pole, they don't guarantee coverage, but pretty much outside of actually being at the physical North and South Pole. You know, like you could be on Antarctica and get coverage. You can be out on the northern polar ice north of Canada and get coverage. That's pretty friggin' good. Certainly for us just hiking,
we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, out here in Texas, we're gonna be okay. But yeah, being closer means stronger satellite signals because they're closer, faster connections, and it also means that you need a much less powerful transmitter to send messages to those satellites because you're not trying to send a message 22,000 miles to a satellite. You're trying to send a message less than 500 miles.
Whoop whoop.
Which is, yeah, I mean, that's massive difference. And so you can have a handheld device that reliably sends text messages via satellite instead of via cell network, which obviously is using towers on the ground that are way closer.
Yeah. And the Bivy Stick has a built-in antenna, right?
Yeah. So it's built into the device itself. It's not something that you extend, but it is able to directly send and receive communications just within the device itself.
Okay. And so Bivy uses the Iridium 9603 model. What the fuck does that mean?
Well, To some extent, it's just like the name for the specific communications device from Iridium that's built into the Bivy. The nice thing to know here is that this is the smallest form factor, the smallest size of any satellite communications module that's available on the market. That's part of why the Bivy Stick itself is so small.
And ultralighters are going to love that. I was looking at some of the competitors, and most of the other competitors are at least a couple ounces heavier than the Bivy Stick is.
I think you probably have the actual weight. It's very light.
Yeah, it's less than 4 ounces. We'll talk about the exact specifications in a little bit here.
Yeah, like that's, for example, probably the most direct, obvious competitor is the Zoleo, which is virtually identical in function, but weighs a bit over 5 ounces.
Yeah, I saw that it's quite a bit heavier.
So for an ultralighter, yeah, definitely makes the difference. I don't know. Anyways, so Iridium built into this chip, they have their special communications technology. They're using short burst data, sending small bits of information out to help ensure reliable transmission and reliable connections between the device and the satellite. The bottom line here is that all this fancy technology lets you be virtually anywhere on the planet. And as long as you're willing to wait a couple of minutes, you can get a signal and send a message in almost any conditions. We say almost because there are some specific rules for communicating with satellite devices that are different than the rules for communicating, but different in like a matter of degree than communicating with a cellular device. But actually, they suffer from a lot of the same problems. They're just magnified because you're trying to connect to something that's 500 miles away instead of maybe 2.
So let's talk about some limitations to any satellite device. One of the things that you run into with satellite devices is signal blockage. Tall buildings, structures, and like dense foliage or canyons can really obstruct those satellite signals and make it a lot slower, harder, or even impossible to send a message through any satellite device, not just the Bivy Stick.
Yeah. One thing I kind of wanted to bring up here, I think some people get really frustrated when they hear that, but like I want to remind folks that your cell phone has the same problems, right? If you are in like a big concrete building, you probably have a really relatively poor cell phone signal. Satellite devices work in much the same way. It's just that they're trying to connect to something that's a lot further away. So they're a little touchier about having things between you and what they're talking to.
Yeah, like when I turn on the Bivy Stick in the house, it doesn't get any signal at all. But I will point out that when I was in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado, I was sending you check-in messages with the Bivy Stick, and those seem to work just fine.
Yeah, I didn't have any issues. As far as I know, I got all of your check-ins.
Yeah, and like to be fair, I wasn't in like a narrow part of the canyon, but the walls were towering 2,000 feet above us, and so I kind of didn't expect to have signal, and I did. Every time I pulled it out, the signal light was green.
And I will throw in that the location wasn't perfect, but it was very close. So like I know at one point y'all went down to the river there. I assume it's the Gunnison River. I wasn't on this hike, so I don't even know what river it was. But it's a river.
It is the Gunnison River.
Yeah. Anyways, y'all went down to the river, and I think that to me it looked like you actually had crossed the river, but of course you hadn't because that's suicidal.
Right.
So, so it's not, and there may be circumstances where it's maybe 20 meters off. So I think that's an important limitation to know, but it was very close.
Yeah. All right. So can you talk to me a little bit about interference? I'm not really sure what that means, but I understand that can be a problem with satellite devices.
Yeah. And so this is something that is actually true of cell signals, of Wi-Fi, satellite communication, all of that stuff. There is a lot going on in the air around us at any given time, especially true in cities, of course, where there's all kinds of people using Wi-Fi networks, using cellular networks, and satellite communicators tend to be relatively low power because you typically want them to operate for long periods of time, and there's a trade-off. You can only have so much battery power squeezed in, especially if you're wanting something to last for a couple of days or ideally several days without needing a recharge. Cell phones, contrary-wise, are charged all the time. Most of us probably charge our cell phones during much of the day. At the very least, I do. I may be a little obsessive.
Just a little bit. Kind of drives me nuts, but moving on.
The point is, cell phones are relatively high power transmitters compared to satellite communicators. And all of these signals, they're traveling through the air along various frequencies. Now, there are designated frequencies for Wi-Fi, for cellular communication that are regulated by the government in order to minimize interference. Because if there weren't, we'd have all kinds of problems where your Wi-Fi could be blocking your cell signal or vice versa. It'd be a whole thing.
Are you getting to the point here?
The point is, satellite communicators are very sensitive to any interference from communication on frequencies that are close to them. So this is like if you're listening to the radio and you kind of get static, or sometimes you're traveling between like counties and you might have two different stations cutting in and out of each other. It's because they're transmitted on the same or very similar frequencies, and so they're interfering with each other's signals, and so you end up getting static. That happens with wireless communications of all kinds, and it just so happens that satellite communicators are quite vulnerable to this because, in part of their low power, the long distance they have to send their messages. That's more or less what it boils down to. If you're trying to use a satellite communicator downtown in a busy city, odds are good you're going to struggle to get a clear signal.
Okay, so not going to be a problem for me.
No, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you should be fine.
Okay. Another limitation to satellite devices is line of sight requirements. So satellite communication generally requires a clear line of sight to the satellite, which can be really challenging to achieve in dense areas, kind of like we talked about with the signal blockage.
Yep.
And so if you're in a really thick, dense forest, you may not have good signal. If you're deep in a canyon, you may not have deep signal. It's kind of the same thing as signal blockage from what I could tell.
Yeah, it's more or less the same problem.
Okay. And I'd like to point out that it's not a fast method of communication. Like we talked about, it's sending signals to a satellite for 85 miles off of planet Earth. And so it's not like we're sending texts back and forth lickety split.
Right. So if you think about it, right, if you're sending a text message on your cell phone, the message goes from your cell phone to the nearest cell tower and then probably gets routed directly to the person you're texting. Maybe it hops one or two cell towers. All of these things are relatively close together. They may be using fiber optic internet on the ground. Communication is going to be extremely fast. When you're sending a satellite message, you're sending that message to the actual satellite, which has to then process it, queue it with any other messages it's receiving, probably send it to some other satellites, send it back to the ground. Maybe there's some ground-based processing that happens before it ultimately reaches its destination. There's just a lot more steps, and those steps are a lot further apart and take longer.
Yeah. When I was on Rancherias Canyon Trail in Big Bend Ranch State Park, it was taking like at least 5 minutes for Bivy to even get a signal when I was on that trail. And I was in a canyon, but it wasn't a real big canyon. The foliage wasn't super dense, but it took a long time. Like I had to wait 5 minutes or more before I could even then send that message. I think you have to think about how you're going to be using these satellite devices as well.
Right. Yeah. If you're looking to like be constantly texting while you're on the trail, I have so many questions about why that's what you're wanting to do. But anyways, the point is this is probably not a device. This class of devices really isn't going to necessarily solve that problem. No matter what device you're buying, no matter how much money you're willing to spend, like that's not really how satellite communications work.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back to more key features. We kind of got pulled away on a little segue there. So with the Bivy Stick, you can do two-way messaging with your phone. So you can send and receive 160 character text messages using your phone. And this is a little bit different than devices like the Garmin InReach. With the Garmin InReach, I believe you can text directly from that device to the recipient. With the Bivy Stick, you connect to the Bivy Stick with your phone via Bluetooth, and then you use your phone to type in that 160 character message and send it from there. Right?
As far as I understand it, that's correct.
We haven't looked extensively into the Garmin InReach, but that's our rudimentary understanding. So with the Bivy Stick, you get a dedicated phone number and email. You can send the same message to up to 5 recipients at one time. And when you text somebody, it always includes your GPS coordinates and a URL link to your location, which is really, really nice. You don't have to press anything to make that happen. It just automatically happens with every single message that you send.
Yeah, I love this feature for when you are out taking a trip, doing some hiking without me, because even just the basic check-in messages, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, all of the messages from the Bivy include that GPS location and that link. So I can just go to my text messages, tap the link. It takes me directly to a map on the Bivy website that shows me exactly where that message was sent from.
Nice.
Which is fantastic. And it also will show me, because I have an account, it'll show me the history of where you've been, and I can see sort of your trail of messages that you've sent me. So that's how I can see where you've been when you're hiking and how I can tell if you're still moving when you send these check-ins.
Yeah. One of the really big things that we use, well, we haven't used Bivy Stick for this, but one of the big reasons that we bought it in the first place is that it has an SOS emergency response. So kind of what this does is there's 24/7 monitoring provided by a company called Global Rescue, which we're going to talk about extensively in a couple of minutes here. But you can activate this SOS button directly through the device, or ideally through the Bivy app with your phone. If you activate it through the Bivy app on your phone, you get direct two-way communication with Global Rescue. And when you hit that SOS button, whether it's directly from the Bivy device itself or whether it's through the app on your phone, it's automatically going to transmit your GPS coordinates to Global Rescue. So this is what you use when shit hits the fan, everything goes wrong, you have a broken leg out in the wilderness or whatever, and you need rescue. You hit that SOS button and Global Rescue is going to be notified and activate emergency response.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a big peace of mind factor, just to know that if something disastrous happens, if we or you end up off trail and you're lost and you're like, boy, I only have so much water and I have no idea where I'm at. I'm not temporarily dislocated. I am fully dislocated. I have no clue. Rather than panicking and wandering around, you can immediately trigger an SOS with your GPS location. Huge peace of mind factor. Very happy we've never needed to use it. We've been using this device for 4 years. We haven't needed it yet, but it's always there. And that's, yeah, for me, it's a huge relief when you're out on these solo hiking trips, knowing that you are not without help.
Yeah. You can also, with the Bivy Stick, do location tracking, personal location tracking, and you can also track your group. So you can view the GPS locations of up to 12 Bivy Sticks off-grid via the app or an in-network with a web browser. I didn't look into a whole bunch of that because, God, I would never be out there with 12 people with 12 Bivy Sticks, but it's out there if you're a group person or whatever. Look into it.
I think this is maybe something where, if you have some sort of like organization that's working in the wilderness and everyone has their own Bivy Stick, you can organize people into groups.
Yeah. I got it. It just doesn't really pertain to me or this podcast.
No, it doesn't.
And then another thing that we love about the Bivy Stick is the unlimited check-in messages. So you can customize preset messages that automatically come with the GPS coordinates.
Yeah.
So the message that gets sent to you when I hit the check-in button says, I'm still alive, right? Is that what it says?
It says something like, this is Gabrielle just checking in to say I'm still alive.
So when I hit the check-in button, it sends that message to you, which tells you that I'm like alive and hitting that button. But it also includes those GPS coordinates of where I am when I hit that button.
Yeah.
And so it's like a trail of breadcrumbs. I will hit that periodically as I'm hiking along. I hit it more frequently when I'm on more difficult trails or when I'm a little bit more worried about getting lost. If I'm really confident and like, I got this, I don't hit it quite as often. But again, with Bivy, these are unlimited. They're not going to bill you for them. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It is really a fantastic feature. I will say, I do think most satellite devices today have, on at least the majority of their plans, do have unlimited check-in. So it's not necessarily a feature that is unique to Bivy, but it is on their lowest cost plan. And it is certainly the feature that I think not even I think. I know for a fact it's the feature we use the most.
Yeah, It is, because I'm not always sending you a bunch of messages because, again, that's not really what it's for. We're not texting back and forth about how our day was when I'm out in the wilderness. But when I'm sending you those breadcrumbs, you know that I'm alive and well.
Yeah. Yeah. It is important to note that this is like a message that you sort of pre-set up in the app, and that if you want to make changes to it, you have to do that in the app. Okay. You just have to Bluetooth to the Bivy to update the Bivy, because the Bivy will have whatever, because you don't have to have your phone on to send this. Once this message is set and you've connected to the Bivy Stick, the message is loaded onto the Bivy Stick. You can turn your phone off and still send this message from the Bivy. But if you want to change the message, you do need to turn your phone on, and you do need to connect it to the Bivy Stick via Bluetooth and then change it. I mention this because we were texting your parents for like years.
They never said anything. Okay, but it wasn't years, but it was a long time.
I'm sure it was a year.
It was New Year's Eve of 2023, I think, that we went out to Big Bend Ranch State Park. Mm-hmm. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Okay. And so because you were coming with me, we were like, okay, well, we need somebody to basically be our base camp person, like we talk about on our Creating an Effective Safety Plan episode.
Right.
And so we thought, okay, well, we can ask my mom and dad to do that because they live here in Texas. So we said, okay, expect to hear from us at least once every 24 hours with this preset message. And if you don't, please call the ranger station. And so we put them on this preset check-in message, and we were sending our check-ins and everything was just fine. But then we forgot that they were on the preset check-in, and your phone number was still on the check-in message.
Yeah.
And so I'm out hiking after we get back from this trip, hitting this check-in button, sending it to you, but presumably also sending it to my parents because we hadn't taken them off of the recipient list.
Yeah.
And they never said anything.
They never said a word about it. They've never mentioned it once. Not even after we took them off. They didn't mention that they stopped getting them.
So I think what we've learned from this is that they're not good base camp people. Your parents are up next when we go to a remote location.
Yeah, I guess that's the lesson, is don't expect your parents to be monitoring these check-in messages.
Anyhow, another key feature of the Bivy Stick is that you can get detailed weather reports as long as you are able to open up your phone. You can access weather forecasts via the satellite. You can access offline maps. And so before you head out on your trip, you can download topographic maps for offline navigation, but you do have to access the maps themselves from your phone.
Right.
And then Bivy Stick has a newer model called the Bivy Stick Mesh. I don't understand anything about what's different about this model. Do you care to enlighten me?
Okay, I'm going to try to think about how to avoid going too deep onto a nerdy tangent because it's very nerdy.
Please spare me.
Very technical. Okay, so the point. So here's the thing. All right, a lot of devices in today's world have wireless communications built into them.
What does that mean?
Through various ways. So, like for example, if you buy a new washing, like washer and dryer, for example, there are a lot of washers and dryers that now can talk to your phone via an app. They're built with wireless communication and presumably could be incorporated into a larger wireless network, such as a smart home, where you could be programming things to happen with, your coffee machine could be controlled via an app, and your lights and your thermostat. These things can all be integrated into a singular sort of network. This is commonly known in technical circles as the Internet of Things.
Oh, I saw that when I was Googling, and I was like, what the fuck is the Internet of Things? This sounds totally made up and childish.
Yeah, no, it's been around for years. It's not new.
Oh my God.
It has been growing rapidly, however, as what's called edge computing, which is more powerful computing at the location, has become sort of a bigger field. I suspect there are very few people who are going to listen to this podcast who know what any of those terms mean, and that's fine. The point and the relevance is this. The Bivy Stick Mesh incorporates mesh communication. What that means, you know what a mesh is, right? Like a net?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like that, but with radio communications. So rather than just being point to point, where you'd have maybe a direct line to the satellite and then a direct line back down to another device on planet Earth, your Bivy might be connecting to various networked devices in the area and using those to connect to the satellite if it itself doesn't have a good connection. So if there are other Bivy sticks in the area, it might connect to those other Bivy sticks. And
without that Bivy stick's permission?
Well, I think it inherently has that permission by being a mesh device, and then piggybacking on that signal in order to connect to the Bivy satellite. Now, privacy is, of course, a big deal. Privacy controls, I can't speak specifically to the details here, but mesh communications are typically expected to be following privacy protocols, and I would presume that Bivy is doing a good job there.
Wow.
It seems unlikely that there are hackers in the wilderness looking to hack your satellite communications, so I wouldn't be overly worried about it. But the point is that the technology is intended to increase the signal strength and availability for the Bivy stick. So the Bivy stick mesh presumably will get stronger signals and get them faster than the Bivy. We haven't tested them head to head, so I can't say that that's a fact, but that is certainly the claim. So,
okay, here's my question to you. When our Bivy needs to be replaced, would you buy a Bivy stick mesh, which is $100 more than the regular Bivy stick? Like, are you that compelled by their claims, or would you stick with the plain Jane?
So that's a fair question. I think I would probably need to see some pretty impressive head-to-head testing. My experience with the Bivy has been that it is quite reliable and effective, and I don't know that I need a stronger signal faster in order to do what we're doing. I could imagine use cases, maybe if you're in more remote parts of the globe where the satellite coverage is not as strong, you might be a little more interested in a device like this. That said, there's also going to be a lot less in the way of other devices for it to be working with to achieve connection in most of those places. So whether or not it's offering you a value for the money, I have to say I remain unconvinced, but open to being convinced.
Okay. So any Bivy people who work for ACR, if you're listening and you want to send us a Bivy stick mesh to test, we are open to that.
We'll put it through the ringer head to head in the remotest parts of Texas, maybe Colorado even.
Oh, yes, Colorado's super remote. All right. So speaking of money, let's talk about the cost of the device.
Yeah.
So the regular Bivy stick, the one that we have, cost $199.95 when it's not on sale. That Bivy stick mesh that we were just talking about costs $299.95. Again, not on sale. So, that's not a crazy amount for a satellite communication device. It's pretty average, honestly. But ways to kind of to save and make your dollar stretch a little bit farther is you can become an REI member.
Yeah.
Or hopefully you already are one if you're listening to this podcast. And they send out 20% off coupons a couple times a year. So you could use one of those coupons to bring it down 20%.
Yep.
I've also seen it on sale on Amazon for various prices. So if you're willing to wait for a little bit, you're probably not going to pay a full $200 for the regular Bivy stick.
I would just be an REI member and use a coupon, or, just take the 10% member dividend and be happy with that. I think it's not terribly expensive. If you're buying backcountry stuff, $200 is not a crazy amount of money to spend on a device.
That's true. But you are correct. It does have a very rugged design. And so what Bivy says is that its optimal operating temperature is anywhere from 10 degrees Fahrenheit to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So obviously, I'm not hiking in 10-degree weather typically. And I really have no business hiking in 105-degree weather, so it should be able to hold up to anything that I'm exposing it to. I gotta see if I can find somebody who's ever taken a Bivy to, like, Everest. What does it do when it drops below 10 degrees Fahrenheit? Because I was looking at a lot of, like, the competitors and stuff, and I never saw any of them rated for, like, negative degrees. But anyhow, and so to go back to its weight, the Bivy stick weighs 3.35 ounces, which is 95 grams for my ultralighters out there, which is actually really light compared to other devices. Right,
yeah, that's much lighter than the Zoleo. I believe it's much lighter than the Garmin InReach as well.
Oh, I didn't even bother to look that up. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's also really durable. So for my geeks out there, it uses the durability standard MIL STD 810. So this standard is a U.S. Department of Defense standard that outlines environmental testing methods for equipment. And so in this standard, it includes 28 different test methods that cover environmental conditions, such as altitude, temperature, humidity, vibration, and shock. This testing method is used to determine if equipment is robust enough for military use, but today it's often applied to commercial products as well. Basically, what this rating tells you is that it is durable and it's going to stand up to quite a bit of exposure and environmental elements. And then, Jon, I was hoping that you could talk to me a little bit about the battery specifications, since you understand all that battery stuff a hell of a lot more than I do.
Well, I'll give it a shot. I do want to throw in, I just took a quick look while you were talking there. It is just a touch lighter than the Garmin InReach Mini 2, which is 3.5 ounces. Garmin has a sort of a whole line of communications devices. That, I believe the Mini 2 is the lightest of those. So it's competitive with the Bivy, but the other ones are of course, all going to weigh more than that. Anyways, yeah, so battery, lithium ion polymer, 1400 milliampere per hour. I don't know what that means any more than anyone else does.
Oh, you don't know it any better than me?
No, I don't. The point is, the Bivy is very battery efficient and has no screen, which is the biggest power drain for any device. So it's advertised as being operating up to 120 hours at the default settings, which of course is
off.
Well, no, it's what we use it at.
Okay, those are default settings.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, so 120 hours comes out to a little less than 5 days. So that's pretty good for a device like this. Now that's if you're not sending, obviously every time you're using the device to send messages or connect to a satellite, you're draining a little bit more battery. So I think with heavier use, you can probably expect, noticeably less battery life. I've
never run into issues with needing to charge it. Now, my longest trips have been 2 nights in the backcountry so far, but I've never had to charge it when I'm out there.
The nice thing is if you do have to charge it, it uses the USB-C cable, which is the standard for cell phones these days, which means you only need one charging cable, which for me, like that's something I look for in a device and have for some time now is what charging port does it use? Is it the same as my cell phone? If so, that's a big thumbs up. I do not like taking a bunch of cords into the backcountry. I think if you're an ultralighter, you will probably want to take no cords into the backcountry if you can. And so being able to just use the check-ins to send a message to your people or your person or your dog, whatever you're doing, then you need no cord. And you've got a good couple of days. But if you're taking just one cord, I think that's the best for most people. So that's it. That's it for the battery.
Okay, awesome.
Lithium ion is the best
Good
for
to
battery
know.
Technology right now. That's what you want for long-lasting batteries.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think next up is to talk about the other part of the cost, and this is actually the main part of the cost of any of these devices, and that is the subscription plans. Because, just like with cell phones, buying the device is only the first step, and then you have to pay for the ongoing connection in order to make that device more than, a very fancy screen, or in this case, brick. So Bivy has a number of plans at various levels. I'm going to avoid giving any specific numbers for the exact costs, the exact number of credits, because those could change at any time. And I think if you're looking at comparing the plans, the thing to do is to go to each device's website and look at what their current plans are right now. Because of course they're going to have promotions, they're going to have specials, they're going to change their plans to compete, to offer new features, whatever. So the way most of these things work is typically there's going to be an initial activation fee. Currently for the Bivy, that is $29.99, which is I think Garmin's is currently the same. Zolio's is $39.99 right now. And there are other providers. I'm not going to sit here and list them all. Typically, you have to buy some sort of initial plan for somewhere between 1 and 3 months. Like an initial commitment. This often is included with the initial purchase of the device as a condition of using the device. This is a big part of how these companies are making their money. They're often selling the devices relatively close to cost. They're making their money on the subscription plans. And so they do want to make sure you actually buy the plan. Anyways, all that said, after you have already completed your purchase and your initial subscription period with Bivy, You can activate and deactivate the plan at any time. When you reactivate it, you do still have to pay the activation fee, so there is some incentive not to just be constantly hopping on and off of plans. It is not a true month-to-month subscription. So far as I know, there's not currently a device on the market for satellite communication that offers a true month-to-month subscription with no activation fee. And that is what it is. I guess if there's a company out there looking to fill that gap, I'd certainly be curious to see what they have to offer. But that said, Bivy offers a very nice basic subscription plan. That's what we use, and it really has been more than sufficient to our needs. It offers pretty limited number of credits. However, so long as you continue to subscribe, your credits roll over, which means that we have, for our purposes, virtually unlimited back and forth texts, unlimited weather checks, etc., etc. It's not truly unlimited. There is actually a number, but because we've been rolling them over for months and months, it's a very high number. And we're not sitting there at night being like, so what'd you do today?
Yeah, if I'm only hiking 4 to 6 months out of the year, all those other months the Bivy's not being used and those credits are just rolling over because we're not deactivating the plan because it's not worth it with that $30 activation fee.
And especially because the way that you're hiking goes, it's not like it's a solid 6 months straight that you're hiking. If that was the case, we would totally deactivate it at the end, reactivate it when you started again. But it's like every other month you're out hiking somewhere where it's nice to have a satellite communicator. Sometimes it's multiple months in a row. Sometimes you go 2 or 3 months without. It never gets to the point where it's really worth turning it off and back on again. Especially because at the present moment, this is the only hard number I'm going to say, that the basic plan for Bivy is $15 a month, which is quite cheap. So far as I know, the cheapest monthly satellite subscription. There may be some other providers, again, that offer the same amount. I think Garmin's lowest plan is also $15 a month.
No, I think their lowest plan is $8. It's cheaper, but it's very, very limited.
Oh, that's okay. That's like the enabled one where you're paying for the check-in message.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper just to have it turned on, but if you're actually using it, it's questionable whether it's cheaper or not. I guess it depends on how many check-in messages you're sending. If you're sending check-in messages the way you do, which I like, probably it isn't cheaper.
Yeah.
Those add up pretty quick. I think I saw that it's like 75 cents a check-in message or something. Anyways, so this is an important thing to think about, though, what the current cost is of the subscription plan that you would be purchasing long-term to use the device. So when we were shopping for these devices, I did some comparison, and the price was a big part of that comparison, as it always is. We can talk more about why I specifically chose the Bivy later, but this definitely was a big factor, that the long-term ownership of the Bivy costs relatively little when compared to its competition.
Yeah. Did you already say that deactivating a plan results in losing your rollover credits?
So I think I implied that, but I didn't explicitly say it. But yeah, that is the case. So far as I know, that is the case, not just with the Bivy, but with any similar device.
Yeah. And then again, with Bivy specifically, there are unlimited check-in messages no matter what subscription plan you use.
That's correct.
And Bivy includes tri-network coverage, which means that it has coverage of satellite, cell, or Wi-Fi, which I gather is important.
Well, it is good to know that the device works that way. So it's not exclusively a satellite communications device. It will use whatever network is fastest and most convenient. So it can connect over Wi-Fi. It can connect via cellular signal. And it will use satellite if that's what's available. I think that's pretty common now because a lot of those chips are pretty small, so you can pack them into these little devices. But it is important to know. And if your device that you're looking at is not offering all of those things, that may be a reason to consider not getting that device and to consider something like the Bivy instead. That is a point in its favor.
Bivy partners with Global Rescue. Can you tell us a little bit about Global Rescue? Because I know this is something that you've done a lot of research into apart from the Bivy Stick.
Yeah. Global Rescue is really, I think it's a really interesting company. So they are one of the leading global providers, as you might gather from their name, of rescue and travel risk services, generally speaking. So this is separate and distinct from travel insurance, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. Travel insurance offers you financial coverage if, like, your flight is canceled or your luggage is lost or something of that nature, where it's
basic bitch stuff.
Yeah, it's a travel risk, but it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the kind of things that we're talking about. Certainly those are problems, and we often buy and have multiple times benefited from travel insurance. Highly recommend getting it to anyone who's making big plans, because wow, it has saved our butt multiple times. But Global Rescue is something different. So what they are providing is a combination of services in the areas of medical evacuation, security evacuation, crisis management, and sort of more concrete and immediate travel risks. Not losing your luggage, but like getting stuck on top of a mountain or having your train derail in the Swiss Alps. I guess I'm going back to the mountains. But anyways, mountains are dangerous. That's what we're learning here. The point is, they offer this service globally. They coordinate with local service providers around the world to provide rescue and emergency services.
So before we get too far into Global Rescue in and of itself, I think I forgot to mention at the beginning that we were going to talk extensively about Global Rescue.
Surprise.
A surprise, motherfucker. Can you talk specifically about Global Rescue and Bivy Stick integration before we get too far into the weeds?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's mention that here. So
what comes with Bivy Stick?
Okay. So Bivy, as we mentioned, has an SOS feature. This is essentially, it's save our souls. It's the common terminology for saying, I'm fucked, come get me. And you send this message out. Well, somebody has to be listening for that message, right? And Bivy is providing a global satellite network, but they don't necessarily have expertise in communicating with every rescue provider in every jurisdiction around the globe. That's not their focus. Their focus is satellite communications. These are two different areas of expertise. So their partner for rescue services is Global Rescue. Global Rescue's expertise is coordinating with local rescue services around the planet. So they have the contact information for, say, whoever it is that's going to come rescue you when you're out in Big Bend Ranch State Park. So they can contact the rangers and emergency services in that area and give them your GPS location, help if you've got a phone and you're able to communicate, help you communicate information about your situation to those rescue services. So that's what their expertise is.
So it's not Global Rescue themselves coming out and getting you. They're just like communicating with the people that you then hope are going to go get you?
Correct. They are the linchpin between you and whoever is supposed to be actually physically rescuing you. So there's sort of like, there's an important step there where you have to not just send a signal, but make sure it gets to the right people in the right place in order to save you. And if you're from, say, Florida, and you bought your device in Florida, and you come to Texas, and you go hiking on the deadliest trail in Texas, and you don't take enough water because you think that you don't need to.
Listen to our episode on Marufo Vega Trail Intel.
Yeah. Anyways, the point is, you don't know who to call for help. Mm-hmm. You're not from that place that you're hiking. Your device doesn't magically know who to call for help. There has to be someone who's providing that information. Global Rescue is that linchpin here that's connecting your need for help with people who are there to provide it.
Okay. And so monthly Bivy Stick subscription includes dispatch for rescue anywhere in the world. That is included with your Bivy Stick subscription.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah. So Global Rescue is providing 20 monitoring for Bivy Stick customers on all of the plans from the basic to the most fancy. That includes not just monitoring, but of course, actually dispatching the appropriate relevant search and rescue based on your GPS location anywhere in the world. And in addition to that, if you want additional coverage from Global Rescue, you can purchase a Global Rescue plan. You can purchase it directly through Bivy, or you can purchase it directly from Global Rescue and then add your Bivy Stick communications information, like your Bivy phone number, your Bivy email address, to your contact info with Global Rescue. You can do it either way. The price is the same. It doesn't matter how you do it.
And why would I do that?
Well, so here's the thing about getting rescued in the wilderness. Search and rescue services are very expensive. They often involve helicopters or boats, the mobilization of a lot of highly trained personnel. Now, in many cases, very fortunately, these services are provided to rescued individuals free of charge. I say in many cases because that is not always true. And there are certain situations where you could be held responsible for the cost of your rescue. This is especially likely if you are undertaking activities, let's say, beyond the realm of normal outdoors activities. This could involve more dangerous climbs, mountain ascents, jet skiing in shark-infested waters. I don't know. The list is sort of indeterminate because it's often up to the discretion of the rescue provider.
Well, and people who do stupid shit as well, rescue personnel are less likely to be lenient and say, well, I'm going to bill this motherfucker for going hiking on Marufo Vega with no water.
Right. Yeah. So you could, if you're out there doing stupid things, you probably want to be paying for this membership because you could easily get stuck with a bill for tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars in rescue services if you actually need them. Right? If a medevac, especially if it's like, say you're a U.S. citizen traveling in a foreign country, you need a medevac back to the U.S.
Woof.
I would not be shocked if you're looking at a $400,000 bill.
I'm sure, at least.
Yeah, depending on how serious your condition is, what country you're in, where you're coming from. These services are very expensive, and it's fortunate that there are funds in place to provide them for ordinary citizens doing relatively ordinary things like hiking with enough water on relatively safe trails, who just maybe suffer some misfortune like a broken leg through no particular fault of their own.
Yeah, I don't think most people who call for search and rescue are billed. I don't want to give people that impression.
I don't want to fearmonger. Yeah, I think most people probably are okay.
Like in Colorado, they have the Colorado Search and Rescue, and I think their mission is to rescue people at no charge to them because they don't want people to be afraid to hit that SOS button. So there's things like that in place.
I will say, we were recently planning a trip to Switzerland, but I was looking into the Swiss Mountain Rescue Service, which is called Riga, and they offer a patronage option where you can pay to be like a supporting member of Riga. However, they make it extremely explicit on their website that it is at the discretion of Riga whether and how much you are billed for any rescue services. Now, this to some extent makes sense because it's an extremely mountainous country, Switzerland is, right? And there are a lot of people out there doing various mountain climbing expeditions, and I think they want to give people a false sense of security to say, hey, you can go do whatever idiotic thing you want with as little preparation as you want. And if you need to be rescued, you can be sure that you're getting it for free and you're not on the hook for the cost of your ill-prepared, ill-thought-out, ill-executed venture. They don't want to encourage people who shouldn't be trying to summit backcountry mountains to summit backcountry mountains. And that makes sense. That's not something that the average person is doing, and therefore not something the average person needs to worry about. If you're hiking up a well-established trail in an area where, a tourist area where a lot of people are doing hiking, I don't think you have any reason to worry about paying for rescue service. We don't pay for this service for the vast majority of our travel.
I think this leads us to another really good point, which shouldn't need to be said, but we're going to say anyhow, is that you should always press that SOS button in all seriousness.
Yeah.
You do not press that SOS button because you're tired and you want to get helicoptered off a mountain, which has happened before. This is like kind of life or death. When you push this button, like you have no way to get off the mountain because you broke your leg and there's nobody with you to help you, like, get you down. You should never be hitting this SOS button for a light reason. Truly, it should be life or death, or like I have no way to get out of this situation on my own and there's nobody around me to help me get off of this mountain. Or like even if you're hiking with somebody, if you break your leg, that's not going to kill you immediately. That person can then run down and go ask for help rather than you hitting that SOS button. So you really need to think about hitting that button before you do it, and only do it in those very, very serious situations.
Yeah, I think you're maybe a little more hardcore than I am. I think if I broke my leg, I would probably always hit it.
I mean, honestly, it's probably going to be faster for your friend to run down and ask for help than for you to hit that SOS button.
It may well be. It may well be.
I say this because, in our very first episode that we did, Beginner Backpacker Adventures, there was a search and rescue that was initiated with a helicopter. And then a bunch of firefighters came up to the top of this mountain. And listen to the episode if you want more details. But I never could figure out why this SAR was initiated. Like, the people who asked for help seemed fine. They didn't extract somebody from this tent in a helicopter. No, the helicopter went out and searched for them. The firefighters came up and talked to them and hung around. Like, I don't know what happened. So if you're listening out there and something terrible happened, I'm really sorry. But it kind of seemed like somebody hit that button when maybe they didn't need to.
Yeah, and that may just be the answer. That may be why we could never find any other information out about it, is that it was just a false alarm, wasted a bunch of people's time. And that's super unfortunate. That's obviously not something that you should do. Like, this is serious business. Like, you should not be sending people a message that you are dying if you are not dying, or that you are in severe danger. I shouldn't say dying. It's not necessarily life or death. It could be severe bodily harm.
Yeah, it can be if you're absolutely lost. If you're immobilized because you've broken a leg or sprained an ankle, you can't get off a place by yourself. Let's not pretend that you're going to be able to crawl down a trail back to your car 5 miles if something is terribly wrong with a leg or an ankle. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's circle back here.
Yes, global rescue.
Get back on track. Okay, so global rescue. So here's just kind of the bullet points straight from the website. Global rescue membership benefits: worldwide field rescue, deployment of teams to rescue members from point of illness or injury for any medical emergency. So this could be like severe life-threatening illness, could be severe life-threatening injury, whatever the case might be. Any medical emergency. Medical evac. So that's transport back to home hospital of choice from anywhere in the world. Medical and security advisory. It gives you 24/7 access to medical personnel, to military special ops personnel who can provide you advice on how to handle a situation that may be occurring in the place that you're visiting.
So do you know, with this medical advisory, can they prescribe, like, if I'm out in Nepal and I get giardia because that water's nasty, if I get on like a video call with a global rescue doctor, can they prescribe a medication to me?
So you can get prescriptions via global rescue if you have opted this. You'd have to be purchasing that portion of the membership directly from them. So they don't offer that as part of the basic sort of rescue. This is an add-on.
You gotta pay for your drugs?
Yeah. It's basically, so I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Let's not make it more confusing than it needs to be in a podcast. But the short answer is yes, you can.
Okay.
You also get free, well, not, I should say free, you should get included access to 24/7, 365 travel assistance. So they can provide you translation assistance. They can provide you assistance to resolve issues like a lost passport, directing you to your nearest U.S. embassy, for example.
I can Google my own damn U.S. embassy.
You can.
Is that all that they do?
Well, no, but that's just one thing they can do. I'm providing examples, all right?
Okay.
Anyways, where were we? Okay. So these are the medical only plans. These are what's included with them. So it's not truly medical only, because they do provide these additional services. And so for 7 days, it's for just one person, it's $140 right now. And that's the same price on the Bivy website or on the Global Rescue website. The price obviously goes up the longer you need it, but you do get a sort of a scaling discount. It's not $140 a week. It's like $190 for 2 weeks.
Is this so the medical only, is that the one that includes like prescriptions as needed?
No.
No, okay.
No, we're going to get to that.
I'm really worried about those drugs.
You are very worried about getting your prescriptions. So they do have a variety of different plan options on their website, as well as a very handy, basically calculator feature in the plan selection where you can pick all of the options. It'll show you exactly what it costs for the options that you want before you make any purchase. So it's very user-friendly. I've messed with it extensively, and we actually have purchased a global rescue plan in the past, and it cost exactly what they said it would. There were no surprises. So I was very pleased with them from that sort of initial customer service experience. So you can, if you are an extensive world traveler, you can buy annual plans or even multi-year plans. You can buy family plans. Family plans, if you're traveling with a bunch of people, are a pretty good deal. They generally cost less than double the individual price, given that you're typically covering at least 3 people, that's a solid deal.
Yeah.
If you're covering 4, 5, 6 people, it's pretty solid. It includes all your kids for free. Well, not for free, but you're not paying extra for having more kids with a global rescue plan, which is nice. That's not always true. A lot of places, the more kids, the more money. Okay, so there are a couple of different specific add-ons.
Here we go. Here's the drugs.
Yeah, we're getting to them. Okay, so the first specialty add-on is the security package. So if you are traveling and you are concerned that there may be the need for physical extraction to protect you from bodily harm during an event such as civil unrest, natural disaster, or government evacuations, you can purchase the security package and they will send people to your location to extract you from that location. Trained ex-military personnel will come and get you out. It's kind of like movie-esque, but this is the thing. Now, they do caveat that if you knowingly go into an active war zone, you are on your own.
It's if something happens while you're there.
Yeah, if you're there, things seem fine, and then a civil war breaks out. If you have the security package, they will come and get you.
Well, how do you communicate with, like, global rescue? Let's say that happened. Because actually, there's a story where this did happen, not pertaining to global rescue. But these climbers, anybody who follows climber culture, his name is Tommy Caldwell, I believe. And he was climbing out, I don't even remember in what country. But anyhow, I was out in the middle of butt fucking nowhere with some friends, and civil unrest broke out. They were taken as prisoners.
Yeah.
Went through this whole thing. There's documentaries about it. It's a crazy, crazy story. But anyhow, if you're doing something like that, if you're climbing out in a country and civil unrest breaks out, how do I contact Global Rescue to get this security package in action?
So they have an app. So you just directly contact them via the app.
What if you don't have service?
Well, that's why you need a bivy.
I see. It's all this. Okay, it's all wrapped up together.
Yeah. So this is the connection, right? So if you have, now you can use any satellite communicator. You provide them what your contact information is, and they'll essentially add you to their contact list.
Okay, got it.
And so then you can just send them a message, and they'll know that it's you because they have your information already.
Sure. Okay, so tell me about this high altitude package.
Okay, yeah. So there's a high altitude package. So if you are summiting mountains above 15,000 feet,
and who isn't?
And who isn't these days? Everyone's doing it. All the kids. Then you do need to pay additional for the high altitude package in order to get that emergency transport, because it is incredibly difficult to get to people who are above 15,000 feet.
Yeah, those helicopters do not work in that thin air.
They do not. That said, the regular plan covers you under 15,000 feet. So if you're in the continental US, you're good. You're good to go. Most of the world, you're good to go. You just need to be mindful if you're relying on this plan. And so those plans do cost extra. In general, the exact pricing of them varies depending on how many people you're covering, how long you're covering them for, how long your trips are, that kind of thing. So there's not like an exact set thing. I don't understand exactly how the pricing works, but it's generally roughly double the price of the plan.
Okay.
And presumably you're taking some risks, so you should be prepared to pay, I suppose.
Those risk takers have money, okay? Yeah. So don't even bitch about this price.
Well, if you can afford to summit Everest, you can certainly afford to pay for the high altitude rescue plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. They do have some special deals as well for students, as well as for individuals aged 75 to 84. They explicitly do not provide rescue services for individuals over 84. They don't offer any explanation. I think we can all draw our own conclusions that statistically the risk is just too high for them to justify.
Okay, but you skipped the global medical consulting package, which I feel like is the drug package.
So that's the total care.
Okay.
Yeah. So total care includes the travel membership services. So all of the stuff that we talked about before with the field rescue, consulting on your travel, whatever travel issues you might have, they probably have someone that you can talk to about how to resolve that travel issue. Medevac, all of that stuff is included, sort of no matter what plan you get. Total care adds on to that virtual consults with physicians, including urgent and specialty consults. So they have not just regular doctors, but you can also talk to a specialist if you need to.
And that's that's virtual, yeah, okay.
It's virtual.
Great.
So you can talk to someone in your home country which is nice. So you talk to, if you're a U.S. citizen, as we presume most listeners are, you can talk to a U.S. doctor. You can get prescriptions sent to the nearest available source. You can have labs and imaging ordered if you're injured, but you don't want a medevac.
That's amazing. So this would be something to use if you're through hiking. Because that's a big problem. If you get sick on the PCT or the AT, finding a doctor can be a real pain in the ass. So, like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very thorough plan. It's definitely not inexpensive, but given that your normal health insurance is not going to help you out with this at all, in many cases, it's very nice to have.
An individual annual plan for this total care option is $2,490.
That's the current price. I looked it up just 2 days ago.
Okay.
And the family plan is only $33.50. So, yeah, I mean, if you are out doing some family through hiking, it's actually pretty cheap to have access to on-call virtual doctors who can set up labs and prescriptions in whatever town happens to be nearest to you.
Interesting. All right. Anything else that you want to tell us about Global Rescue before we get back to Bivy?
No, I mean, that more or less sums it up. They do, for members, also provide some pretty comprehensive travel advisory information about destinations around the world. So wherever you're going, you can request or just directly access from them some detailed information about being a traveler in that place or that country.
I was on Global Rescue's website, and that's where I learned that you cannot take a satellite communication device everywhere in the world. Like, you can get fucking arrested for that shit. They had a whole story about somebody who took a satellite device into China, and that's not allowed, and this person didn't know that, and they extracted, or like they rescued this person somehow.
Yeah. They have some crazy stories on their website. Anyways, yeah, they're just to avoid fear-mongering, the list of countries where you could be arrested or otherwise in legal trouble for having a satellite communicator is very short.
It is. And
it is what I would refer to as the usual suspects for any sort of North American or Western Hemisphere based person. If you think of a list of countries that are generally viewed negatively from a Western Hemisphere bias, it's probably those countries.
But it wouldn't have occurred to me.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have thought twice about traveling to, for example, China and taking my Bivy Stick. I wouldn't have known.
That's fair. That's a good point. I would think there are probably a lot of places that you might travel in China where you would want a satellite communicator, but you certainly don't want to be bringing one in from outside.
Yeah.
They may sell some local ones. I don't have any idea.
Oh, okay.
Back on track.
All right, so let's kind of quickly touch on kind of the comparison between the Bivy and its competitors and kind of why we chose Bivy.
Yes.
So there's a lot of competition out there. We've got the Garmin InReach, we've got the Zoleo, we've got spot devices, personal locator beacons, and we've got Bivy. And we, in all of our wisdom, have chosen to go with the Bivy, and that's what this episode is all about. So kind of talking about Garmin, it's quite a bit more expensive to go with one of the Garmin InReach. They have lots of different models and such. But typically to buy a Garmin device, you're going to be dropping $300 to $400. And then their subscription plans are anywhere from $8 to $50 per month. So that's not something that we were super interested in. I don't know if you want to chime in with any more.
I think what it came down to there was very much the bottom line, right? So the Garmin InReach is also using the Iridium network, has many of the same features and limitations as the Bivy, or you might even say pretty much all the same features and limitations as the Bivy. The InReach has a screen and on-device messaging. A lot of people like that. You are going to pay extra for that. That was not important to us.
Mm-hmm.
If that's important to you to have on-device messaging, that's probably your go-to. It's certainly the least expensive option to have on-device satellite messaging. I think it's just about the only game in town, to be honest.
I think it is.
There are, I think, some other options, but you're generally paying a lot more.
Okay.
And, Garmin has a great reputation as a brand. I like Garmin. We have Garmin watches.
Yeah, I love my Garmin watch.
Incredibly, incredibly durable. We've beat those things to hell and they still work.
So many OCR races, so many mud runs. Mine has survived the world's toughest mudder and it's still going.
Yeah. So it was slammed, smacked, bashed, crashed, dunked underwater a lot.
The buttons got so caked in mud that I had to I couldn't push the buttons anymore because it was just so saturated in mud. And once I got all the mud off, it continued to work.
Yeah, went right back to functioning. Nothing against Garmin as a brand. It was just that what you're paying for there is the screen. And so if you care about that, then you want to look at that. If you don't care about that, as we do, then you probably don't need to spend the extra $100 to $200 up front. And then Garmin subscription plans aren't really any cheaper.
Yeah, that $8 a month plan is pretty shitty. And you're paying for a lot of things that you would be using.
Yeah.
So then we've also got personal locator beacons. They're all abbreviated as PLBs. So the initial purchase price of a PLB is a lot more expensive. They can range $300 to $600 or beyond. So these PLBs require custom batteries. And if that battery gets activated, the battery replacement costs nearly as much as a new unit. And PLBs can't be used for anything other than alerting authorities to distress. So they are not a two-way device. You cannot message with a personal locator beacon. So I think like a lot of Coast Guard type people use this. A lot of people use these on boats and stuff, but it is only to basically SOS. That is its only function. So didn't seem like a good option for us. And then Zoleo seems pretty similar to the Bivy. Some big differences that I saw is that the Zoleo functions in slightly different temperature ranges. So it functions in 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 113 degrees Fahrenheit, so it tolerates the heat a little bit more.
But the cold.
But the cold a lot less. Yeah. So it's more of a Texas type of device. And it's heavier, like we already pointed out. It's a couple ounces heavier, which can be a big deal to some people. But I guess, John, my question really for you is, we've kind of talked about pros and cons of these different competitors. Why did you ultimately choose the Bivy as our research guy, product decider guy? What led you to this decision?
It was a complex decision. I think I mentioned earlier, I actually made a spreadsheet to project the cost of ownership over a period of 5 years for these devices. And I took it out that far because I wanted to know, like, was there a point where owning one of these devices would become cheaper? I projected, ideally, we're going to buy this thing and we're going to keep, like, it should be rugged. It should last us at least 5 years. And I think the Bivy...
we'll get to that. Don't say anything yet.
We're going to talk about that. That said, I looked not just at cost, though. I also looked at features, functionality, as well as reviews. And when it comes to satellite communicators, the devices that had the strongest, most positive reviews were the Garmin inReach 2 and the Bivy Stick. The Zoleo had some criticisms of its functionality in terms of not being as reliable, not being as durable as advertised. It's been some years since I've looked at that, but from what I've seen, Bivy still has the overall edge in review scores over the Zoleo. And so it just didn't seem worth sort of taking the chance. The Zoleo is cheaper than the Bivy, but it's not a lot cheaper.
Usually it's about $150, I think.
Yeah, so the retail is $50 less than the Bivy, which I was looking with the Bivy to save $100 to $200 versus the inReach. Another $50 just wasn't quite enough to sway me that it was worth the risk, especially because I do not want to get the cheapest possible device because it's a life-saving device.
Yeah.
So I don't want to pay more than I have to, but I do want to get something that's reliable and solid. Or as a company has been in the business of making these type of devices for a long time. They have a lot of experience, especially in the marine world. They make a lot of devices.
They make a lot of PLBs.
Yeah. So they're very much a direct competitor to Garmin. And, you know, when you're competing with Garmin, you either go super cheap or you try to make something that's just as high quality, if not better. I think ACR has leaned toward making really quality stuff. And so I've been pretty impressed with that. Their customer service had very positive reviews, and that's pretty important as well with a device like this. You want to know that there are people in place so that if there's a problem with your device, that like you're being taken care of in a timely fashion and in the way that you would want to be. So we'll talk about our customer service experiences with Bivy in a bit here, but that's sort of what it came down to, is that the price was right. The price over time stayed cheaper than Garmin. There's never a point at which it's cheaper to own a Garmin long term than it is to own a Bivy, unless you're just not using it. But then you're also not using the Bivy, and the Bivy's still cheaper. So you just can't get lower. it just comes down to we didn't need the screen. Okay. So that's kind of it. Just solid reviews. The right price, good product.
Okay, let's dive into a little bit of our experience with Bivy so far. I have been really, really satisfied with the Bivy so far. We did have one malfunction with the Bivy stick. I think that was I want to say it was in 2023, but I can't remember what was wrong with it. Do you remember what was wrong with the device?
I don't know exactly what caused it, but I believe what happened was that it stopped being able to get a signal. So I think the transmitter became damaged somehow. We actually have no idea how.
Okay, so the transmitter was damaged, so that meant we couldn't do anything.
We were just throwing it into backpacks, which we threw on the ground. So who knows what could have happened?
Hey, that's what you do when you're backpacking.
It's
so
true.
Don't even act like we did something wrong. Fuck that shit. Okay, so that happened right before my very first solo trip to Big Bend National Park.
Yeah.
And you got on the line with customer service and they were like, oh yeah, the device needs to be replaced. You told them that I was leaving like the next day or whatever. I think it was 2 days out. 2 days. Okay. We majorly fucked up. We should have been testing the Bivy like a week before my trip. We learned that lesson through this experience. We talk about that in the episode on creating an effective safety plan. Definitely listen to that.
Yeah, that's whatever your satellite communicator is, test it a week out, then test it again 4 days out, test it again 2 days out. You're not going to get a replacement after that. So after that, you just got to hope it works. But it should work. You've tested it.
You will, but you're just fucked on that particular trip.
Yeah.
So since you were the one who interacted with Bivy's customer service, walk me through that.
Yeah, so they were fantastic. They did everything in their power to get us a replacement device, even before getting the device back from us. Like they weren't waiting to receive this device, then sending us a replacement. They were like, we're going to get you a replacement device as soon as possible. They shipped it overnight via FedEx. Unfortunately,
we don't need to go into the whole FedEx thing.
Well, yeah, it didn't arrive on time. The long story short is that I was very displeased with FedEx's customer service, which fed me a line and wasted a bunch of my time and ultimately didn't deliver the device on schedule.
But that wasn't Bivy's fault.
But it wasn't Bivy's fault. No, they shipped it overnight. It arrived within 48 hours, which is what overnight shipping really means, especially because we had called later in the day initially. So they really had like less than 24 hours to get it to us, which is virtually impossible to ask. But they were extremely friendly, replaced it at no cost, never gave us even the slightest bit of trouble about it. Like it was immediately, how can we help? No pushback whatsoever. Just troubleshooting, kind of walking through to make sure that I had restarted the device, that it was fully charged, and then okay, let's get you a new device.
I think
super rare to have that.
I think when I was kind of doing some prep for this episode, as I was researching the Bivy stick, I did see quite a few complaints about the Bivy stick stopping working.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this may be a not unheard of issue, which really sucks if that's true. But even if these Bivy sticks stop functioning more often than we would like, with that kind of customer service, I'm not really sure that should affect your decision on whether or not to own a Bivy stick.
Yeah, I would say it's not like it happens all the time, right? This has happened once in 4 years. We use it very frequently.
We do. I would say I use it 6 to 8 months out of the year.
Okay, so relatively heavy usage. Only once have we had a problem. And I think, I guess I haven't looked at exactly what the current review scores are online, but
it's not enough to affect the reviews, but it's something that you'll see if you are Googling the ACR Bivy Stick, you'll see stuff on Reddit and stuff like that about it stopping working. But if they're going to replace it and they're going to replace it so quickly and you're doing your due diligence and actually testing it a week out from your trip, you're going to be fine.
Right.
Okay. And it's really easy to use, even for poor little me who struggles with any kind of technology. I don't know if the listeners understand the full magnitude of that ability. It's quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, when I add a new device to our home, or I want to get a new TV or something, and it's got some sort of features.
Oh, I don't like
beyond that. Turning on and off. and I guess you're very comfortable with Chromecasting. But anything beyond that, you're I don't like this.
I can't use it. It's confusing.
Yeah. You're what I like to call, and this is a term some people will know and some people won't, a Luddite. You just aren't a big fan of technology.
No, I'm not.
And it's not that you're not capable of using it. It's that in many cases you're not interested in learning to use it. You don't want to learn how to use it. And if it provides any resistance, then you're not going to bother to learn how to use it because it's too much trouble.
I have a low frustration tolerance with technology.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You're not alone in that. There are a lot of people like that who are just, they hit a wall with technology, and rather than looking for a way to go around it, they're just like,
Fuck
this
shit.
sucks. Yeah. That's fine. Go off though. Because the Bivy, you didn't do that. You didn't find that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never had any problems using the Bivy. It's very simple. I figured out how to use all the functions, from the check-ins to the messaging to the tracking. I can do it all without being confused.
Yeah. I know I've looked at the weather on it. Have you ever used it to check the weather?
Yes, I tried to check a weather report once and I couldn't get the weather report. I was using it correctly, but it said it wasn't available or some shit. So I think it was actually a Bivy malfunction, not my fault.
Okay. It's also possible that for whatever reason, like where you were, they may not have had a weather report.
Yeah. All right, so we have talked about key features of the Bivy Stick. We have talked about what that Bivy Stick can do. We've talked about Iridium's satellite network, how Bivy works with Global Rescue, additional features that you can purchase with Global Rescue. Let's kind of move on to talking about how to actually use the ACR Bivy Stick. Let's run through it real quick.
Okay. Well, getting started, it's pretty easy. You just install the app, make yourself an account, and follow the instructions to activate the device, add your emergency contacts, and pick a plan. You get your phone number, it automatically is added to the app for you, so you don't have to do a whole lot of thinking, but you can look it up there so you can add it to your contacts, your base camp person's contacts, your dog's contacts, whatever. The complicated part, I think, that occasionally throws you for a loop, honestly throws me for a loop, just because it's hard to remember, is what the different colors of the lights on the Bivy Stick mean. Yeah,
there's a lot of colors and there's a lot of places for these colors to flash.
But more or less, there are three lights on the Bivy. And once you sort of start using it, it becomes pretty intuitive, I think, to remember which one is which and what they mean. The power light is next to the power button, which makes it pretty easy to figure out. And as you might expect, green means good battery, means more than 50%. Yellow means you're getting low, and red means less than 20%. It's normally a very dim light, but if you do push the power button once, then it'll show brightly so you can see how much battery power. Then there's a signal light, which is up on what I think of as the top of the device. And I think there's like an icon, or maybe it says signal.
It says signal, but it's below the power light.
Okay. See, this is where, like I said, I get a little... You need to talk about the lights. You use this a lot more than me.
Well, the lights always confuse me. But yeah, so the signal light indicates satellite visibility status. So it is labeled as signal on the device, so you can't not know what this light is for. So when the signal light is green, it means it has a strong signal. When you're sending those check-in messages or sending an actual 160 character message to a recipient, it's going to be able to send that message out pretty quickly and easily. It should be green if you're trying to send out messages, particularly important messages. One thing that can help with the signal is holding the Bivy Stick upright rather than on its side or upside down with the built-in antenna facing the sky, which I believe is with the power button up at the top is where the antenna is built into.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious when you have the Bivy which side is up.
Yeah. So if the signal light is yellow, the signal is medium to weak. It'll still be able to send out those messages or receive messages, but it may take longer. And if that signal light is red, the signal is very weak or there is none. You're probably not going to be able to get a message out. So the signal light flashes green when it's acquiring a GPS location, and it turns off to preserve the battery light. So it's not always going to be flashing green, yellow, or red at you. The status light is labeled as status on the device, so you know which one the status light is. And this is the one that confuses me the most often. So I'll do my best to explain it here. So when the status light is yellow, your message that you just sent is being sent, or it's queued to send if it's flashing yellow. If your status light is green, then you have received a message from the satellites. If that status light is flashing green, it means that
you've received a message, but it hasn't yet been added to your phone. You have to connect your phone before you can see it.
And then if your status light is blue, that means that you're currently tracking your location via the Bivy. And if the status light is red, it means that you have activated the SOS button.
Yep.
These basic instructions are printed on the back of the device itself. So if you forget what each of these lights mean, there's a real quick synopsis on the back of the device, which is super nice. I didn't realize that until pretty recently.
I also missed that, actually.
So super, super nice. So sending and receiving messages in the Bivy app is pretty straightforward. To compose a message in the app, you click the message icon. Like I said, you can select up to 5 recipients. You type in your message and you hit send. And then in the app, it'll say sending. And then when it finally actually sends, it'll get time stamped. And that's how you know that it's made it to the recipient or recipients. While you're trying to send this message, the Bivy Stick status light flashes yellow. And then once you've successfully sent it, the Bivy Stick status light stops flashing yellow. And as I said, the app status changes to a timestamp. In every single message that you send, it does include your location, GPS coordinates, and a map to URL link are all automatically included with your message. So I have never gotten a Bivy message to my phone because either I am with you hiking or I am the one hiking and sending the Bivy messages. So I was hoping you could maybe tell me, like, what does it look like with the link and the coordinates when I send you these messages? Like, how do you use them? How easy is it to use them? What does it look like in real life?
Yeah, it's incredibly easy. It's just a link at the bottom of the text message, and you just click on the link and it takes you to an interactive GPS map and it shows you the location. You'll have a bunch of dots for any previous messages you've received, and you can tap on any of them to see the message. You can also go to a list of the messages and then tap on any one of the messages and it'll take you back to the map to show you where that message was sent from on the map. So it's actually fantastic. I would say it's moderately intuitive when you look at it for the first time. As soon as you start using it, it becomes incredibly easy and just feels like second nature. Like if you first get to, you might be like, I don't know what to do here. But as soon as you tap on something, you're like, oh, okay, this is easy. It is even easier than it looks.
For receiving messages, Bivy Stick automatically listens for incoming messages for 15 minutes after you send or receive a message. And then it wakes up every 15 minutes thereafter to check for incoming messages. You can manually check your mailbox. So the way to do that is you short press the power button on the Bivy Stick itself to manually wake it up, and it'll check for 3 minutes. Now, this does use some of your credits if you're manually checking. Again, we don't want to put numbers out there because those numbers can change, but it will use credits if you're manually checking. So if you're check-in messages that we've raved about so far, you can send a check-in message directly from the Bivy Stick device itself. You do not need your phone to send that check-in message, or you can send it from the app itself. So to send a check-in message from the Bivy Stick device, all you do is you press the check-in message. There's a check mark button on the Bivy Stick itself, and you press that real quick. So then the status light will flash yellow until that message is sent. I mean, you want to make sure that the device itself has signal before you hit that check-in button. If you want to send a check-in message from the app, which I don't know why you would waste your phone's battery, but you can. Go pull up the app on your phone. There's a button for a check-in message. You just hit that and it sends out that preset message.
Yeah.
And again, I know we've already mentioned this, but this is worth mentioning again. All of your check-in messages include GPS coordinates and a map link, just like your 160 character messages. And these are free and unlimited with a Bivy Stick subscription. So we use these for me to show you that I'm moving. Yeah. Because the idea is if I'm moving, I'm okay. And if I'm moving and getting lost, at least then you have a track of my trail and you can give those coordinates to rescuers. But do you want to go a little bit deeper into how you use my check-ins and what you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, so we're about to talk about the location tracking and sharing features of the Bivy really briefly, but fundamentally, that's how I use your check-ins. Because you send check-ins pretty regularly, we don't need to track your hike or share your location on like an ongoing basis, which does use credits, of course, as does everything.
Yeah, and it burns your phone's battery a lot faster if you're actively tracking.
Yeah, it does burn because it will use your phone's GPS to assist with that. It'll of course also burn the Bivy's battery a lot faster if you're actively tracking. But if you're just sending check-ins once an hour, I have a track of where you've been, and I could even, if needed, I could give you directions to go back. I think you could actually, in the Bivy app, you could probably look back at your GPS location as well. But anyway, regardless, I could say head north or head east and pray that you can figure out how to use a compass for once in your life. Anyways, so I more or less use it as a location tracking feature. So I can see where you've been, where you are, and know that you are still on the move, or that you've reached, whatever your campsite is for that day, whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Bivy does have an actual location sharing or tracking, well, both feature. So you can track your own location for your own use in the Bivy app. So just like with any other GPS tracking device, like a Gaia GPS app or just Google Maps, you can even, pay attention. You can set like your route. Gaia GPS, you can track your hiking route and see where you've been. Bivy has a route tracking app where you can track where you've been, and so you can backtrack easily by just following your trail backwards in the app. You can also share that location, which sends a link just like the check-in messages that when clicked on, takes the person to the Bivy website to an interactive map that shows them that track that is updated. I don't know if it's live, but it's every couple of minutes it'll update.
Well, yeah, you set the intervals. When I'm sharing, I can check it to be
you can set it to different.
Yeah, I think default is 10 minutes, but you could do every 30 minutes, and I don't know what else.
It affects how many credits it uses.
Yes.
So that is absolutely a feature that you can use. My advice to anyone who's considering using that would be to do the free check-ins serve the purpose that you need this for? Probably they do, and you should just use your check-ins.
Yeah, we used it kind of before we were savvy users, and it blew through my phone's battery so fast, and it made my phone hot as well, which then blew through the battery faster. If I was somewhere bushwhacking, I would consider using it. But for any normal, even remote trail, I'm probably not going to use it.
Yeah, constantly running the GPS on your phone, probably not the optimal choice to go, especially when there's a much easier option, a much less cost-intensive and energy-intensive option. So I would probably not recommend that most people use that unless you really know exactly why you need it.
Yeah. And so you can activate the sharing location via the app, and that's pretty intuitive. All you hit is the share location button. But you can also trigger this via the Bivy Stick device itself. All you do is you hold the check-in button for 5 seconds, and then it's going to be sent to your Bivy profile on the cloud at the default interval, which is 10 minutes. And again, your status light will flash blue while you're in that tracking mode.
Now, as far as I understand it, if you are just using the on-device tracking, you could have your phone off. It's obviously not going to drain your phone battery if you're doing it via the on-device tracking. However, it is a fixed 10-minute interval. You don't get a choice. So it's going to use your credits at whatever the current price is for that 10-minute interval tracking. And again, my question is always just why are you doing that when you can just send check-ins periodically? You could send check-ins every 10 minutes yourself if you really wanted to.
All right, so SOS activation. You can do this via the device itself or via the app. It's definitely better to use the app if at all possible. But if for some reason your phone is dead or you dropped it on the bottom of the ocean or whatever happened, from the device itself, you can lift the red flap on the bottom of the Bivy Stick and you press and hold the SOS button for 5 seconds. Once you've done that, the status light blinks red to let you know that the SOS has been activated. But obviously, this only sends the SOS to Global Rescue with your GPS coordinates. You can't provide them any details. You can't tell them, oh, I broke my leg, or I got attacked by a bear, or whatever is going on. I'm lost. All they know is that you've sent out an SOS signal. So that's definitely not ideal. They'll still send help, but they're not going to know what kind of help you need. So if at all possible, if you do need to use the SOS activation, you want to do it from so to do it from the app, you're going to touch the SOS button on the Bivy app screen. It'll ask you to confirm the request so you don't accidentally send that request. And it'll also ask you to type SOS to verify this request. They really don't want to get accidental SOS requests, which is understandable. When you hit the SOS button, whether it's from the app or whether it's from the device, it's going to send an emergency text with GPS coordinates and location to Global Rescue. The Bivy Stick automatically sends location updates at regular intervals to Global Rescue. It's once per minute for 10 minutes once you've initially hit that SOS button, and then every 10 minutes thereafter. If you activate that SOS from the app allows you to have two-way communication directly with Global Rescue so that you can provide details to Global Rescue and receive rescue plan updates. And that's why it's important to do it from the app if your phone is functional.
Yeah, definitely would prefer to be able to communicate with someone in a situation like that.
What you need when you are lost in the desert is very different when you've been attacked by a grizzly bear in Wyoming.
Right. Well, and even let's say, you're in Wyoming, maybe you were attacked by a bear, maybe you fell into a creek bed.
Yeah.
And the specific situation might dictate, exactly. Maybe you're just lost, but you have food and water, you just don't know how to get home.
Yep.
They may be able to tell you what to do.
Exactly.
If you know how to use a compass, they may be able to say go west.
You can also cancel the SOS button, whether because you hit it by accident or because your status changed. You can do that from the device. So from the device, you would press and hold the SOS for 5 seconds until that red light stops flashing, and that cancels it. Or in the app, you simply hit the cancel SOS button. So super easy to cancel it if suddenly something changes and miraculously you don't need help anymore.
Right, yeah. Somebody else stumbles upon you and is able to save your life. Or
exactly.
You suddenly remember that you're not lost. You just had your map upside down or something.
And I think people really seem to get caught up on the fact that Bivy doesn't have an on-screen with it. And so I just wanted to go over what you can do without your phone, like how you can use the Bivy without your phone. So remember that all the essential features can be used on the Bivy Stick itself without your phone.
Yeah.
The limitation is that you can only send those preset outgoing messages with those check-in messages. Like, I can't get messages from you if I am using just the Bivy Stick itself.
Right.
But I can send check-in messages to my heart's delight. That lets you know that I'm still well enough to be hitting those check-in messages. And it tells you if I'm moving or not because each of those check-in messages have my location with it. I can hit the SOS. I can activate that emergency response from the Bivy Stick itself. No, I can't communicate with Global Rescue directly, but I can still get the help that I need with just the device. And I can do the tracking with just the Bivy Stick. I don't need my phone for any of those things. I think people kind of lose sight of that sometimes and go, oh my gosh, I can't use the Bivy Stick without my phone. And that's not quite true.
I would really say it's for the purposes that we use it for, right? I think that's maybe the thing to remember is that you're not buying a cell phone that connects to the Iridium satellite network or whatever satellite network, the Inmarsat or, who cares? You're not buying a cell phone here. You're buying a device that is to be used as a safety feature to help, improve your safety and keep people back home or keep some sort of an emergency contact informed as to your location and well-being. The purpose isn't to be able to make phone calls.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if that's what you're looking for, then this is 100% not the device for you. You shouldn't buy it. You will be disappointed. If you want a satellite cell phone, you got some shopping to do. I can't help you with that. But I don't think we basically don't use our phones when we use it. I don't think I generally connect my phone to it unless I need to change the message. Do you ever connect your phone to it?
Yeah, when I want to give you details about, like, if my hiking plans change, I have to actually directly message you. So if a trip goes exactly as I've planned, I don't need to use my phone. But if anything changes for any reason, I do open the messaging feature. But I don't have to do that. That's, that is optional. It's
It's definitely a nice to have. I understand why people like the screen, but I do think that you're right that people get a little hung up on it, and like it's not the core feature is as a safety device, and I think it really does serve that pretty well without a screen.
Yeah. And I think that's about all there is to say about the Bivy Stick and global rescue, unless you have anything that you've neglected to say.
No, I don't think so. I think it comes across. We're huge fans of the Bivy Stick. There are some limitations. It's not a perfect device. But
I'd buy it again, though. When we need to replace it, I don't think I would shop for another product.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to just see what else is out there, but I'd have to be pretty convinced that something was way better and was also not crazy more expensive. Yeah, Bivy's earned our business. So.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of This Fucking Trail.
Happy hiking.